At this stage, financial incentive programs enacted by governments are the key to moving solar power into the mainstream. To achieve this outcome, an incentive program must be both long-term and substantial enough to support the development of PV systems on buildings of all different sizes, from the small to the very large. Over the past several years, a growing number of nations and states, including New York, have implemented incentive programs for PV and other clean energy technologies. These incentives have taken on many different forms, including grants, tax credits, and tradable renewable energy certificates, or RECs. But the incentive model that has resulted in the most extensive solar adoption, cost declines, and job growth is what is known as the feed-in tariff. It is this approach that would most effectively realize the goals of the Empire State Solar Initiative, and therefore what the campaign is advocating for in 2009. And here's how it works. A feed-in tariff permits owners of clean energy technologies, such as PV, wind, biomass generators, and other sources, to feed in or sell some or all of the power that they produce to the electricity grid. The local utility is required to purchase this power from these producers in contracts lasting up to 15 to 20 years. A tariff is the rate at which a power producer of any kind is paid for the electricity that they generate. Under a feed-in tariff, clean power producers are paid a premium for their electricity that is of a greater value than that which is paid to conventional electricity sources such as coal, gas, oil, and nuclear. Different clean power technologies are set to sell their power at different tariffs. The tariff for each is based on the cost of generating electricity with that specific technology, plus a profit that ensures a reasonable return on investment over time. In the case of PV, the tariff may range anywhere from 3 to 5 times the price that is offered for electricity that is generated from fossil fuel and nuclear sources. The feed-in tariff guarantees a profitable return and a predictable payback period, and it is for this reason that it has been the most successful driver of global clean power growth this decade. Take, for example, Germany, which introduced an advanced feed-in tariff in 2003. Since that time, it has emerged as the world's leading adopter of clean power technologies. Currently, the country has about 4 times more PV installed within its borders than the United States, in spite of having less sunlight and less than a third of the population. In 2008, driven by its own feed-in tariff, Spain installed more PV than any other country, and 7 times more than the United States. But the feed-in tariff is no longer only found in Europe. It is now beginning to take hold in North America. In 2009, Ontario, Canada will implement a new feed-in tariff, much like Germany's. The city of Gainesville, Florida, has become the first in the United States to adopt such a policy for PV. California is considering expanding the limited policy that it introduced in 2008, and in the past year, no fewer than 14 states have introduced bills calling for the creation of a feed-in tariff. In addition to rapidly increasing PV adoption within New York, a feed-in tariff would also realize other related goals that are central to the Empire State Solar Initiative. This includes local economic development and green-collar job growth. The case of Germany is again instructive, because that country now supports some 250,000 clean energy jobs, thanks in large part to its feed-in tariff. And just as important, the German experience has shown us that the growth and market expansion that feed-in tariffs produce accelerate the rate at which PV declines in price. Today, the cost of investing in photovoltaics in Germany is about 20% less than it is in the United States. And that's critical, because making solar permanently cheaper and competitive should be the underlying goal of any incentive program, including the Empire State Solar Initiative. What does a feed-in tariff cost to implement, and who pays for it? The premium that utilities must pay for renewable electricity is ultimately passed on to and spread among all electricity ratepayers in a given area, and is reflected in their monthly electricity bills. What's the average impact? In 2008, Germany's national feed-in tariff increased household bills by an average of only €3 per month. Closer to home, the city of Gainesville's new feed-in tariff for PV will only add an estimated 93 cents to the average monthly bill in 2009. A key feature of the feed-in tariff that relates to cost, and therefore to what ratepayers will ultimately pay in the long term, is that the model is not intended to be a permanent incentive that continues indefinitely. This contrasts sharply with the billions of dollars of government subsidies that are transferred each year in the United States to lower the cost of nuclear and fossil fuels. Rather, feed-in tariffs are designed to jumpstart new industries and drive down costs. Over time, they decline, and eventually, they're retired completely. This means that someone who installs a PV system this year would receive a higher payment for the power they produce over 20 years than someone who decides to install in subsequent years. This declining structure is critically important because it encourages early adoption and also puts pressure on solar manufacturers and installers to reduce costs over time. New York State's current incentive program for PV consists of upfront rebates and tax credits, but the approach has supported only incremental growth because it centers on small properties and because funding for the program is not guaranteed in the long term. For these reasons, New York's program is incapable of achieving the Empire State Solar Initiative goal of pushing PV into the mainstream over the next decade. In order to realize this goal, a much stronger incentive approach will be required, and based on recent history, it is clear that that approach should be a New York State feed-in tariff.